Welcome back, everybody. Unless, of course, you didn't go anywhere, then I guess I'm just welcoming myself back. Um, we're going to get ready for our next speaker here. Folks, I would like to introduce Richard Franklin. Richard Franklin is the founder of Discover Golf. Um, he is a fantastic human being, and I've got to know him for the last couple of years. And actually have a few of his games in my arsenal now. King Putt is fantastic. Hopefully we'll learn a little bit about that here in the speech. As the founder of Discover Golf, he's a game designer, an innovator. He is a champion for all things childhood play, one of Golf Digest's best young teachers this year. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Franklin.
Josh, thank you so much. Just before I get started, so I'll just pull up my slide deck and share screen. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Host is disabled. Okay. All
Bryce, you
good?
got him? Okay, yeah, beautiful.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Josh, I appreciate the opportunity. Everybody that's tuned in, I know that there's always opportunity cost with doing education events, so I take this very seriously. I'm going to try to compact what is typically done in a 3-day workshop, 24 hours of play theory and game design into a fairly tidy 25-minute presentation. So what I'm going to talk to you guys about today is what is fun. Obviously, we're in a junior golf context, so I'll try to keep the rails on it in that fashion. And we're going to unpack a constellation of concepts. There are a lot of terms, textures, nuances to this discussion. So hopefully I can bring that to bear and get us to a fertile place of understanding. So what we're going to be talking about is engagement first coaching. That's the cornerstone of what we're doing, and just highlighting a little bit about Discover Golf, where we are. Humbled, grateful for coaches like Josh and a lot of other coaches listening in that are using some of our games, that are attaching some of their thinking to our culturally relevant, child-centric, play-to-learn ethos for the 4 to 12-year-old set. That is our focus. I exclusively work with that age range. I exclusively work in group format. And that's it. That's 100% of my focus. 4 to 12, groups only. So let's get into it. I'll just let this play for a second. And everything that I'm going to talk about, the theory, the games that we make are the conduit through which that theory flows. So I'm going to do my best here to give you a 5, 6, 7 point articulation on why we think King Putt is effective from a learning standpoint, from an engagement standpoint, from a programming standpoint, from a business standpoint. We're going to be looking at how each one of these games has a theoretical underpinning. So, does it need to be fun? I think there's a lot of different perspectives here, and you're going to hear coaches say, well, you need to be getting them on the golf course, you need to be progressing to a certain score, you need to be doing a lot of things. Where does fun fit in a modern junior golf program? Well, perhaps we could look at just some overarching data and sort of the cultural moment that we're in. So over and over and over and over and over again, you're seeing peer-reviewed research studies that show the number one reason why kids participate in not only junior golf programs, but all youth sport activities is to have fun. So from just first blush, it's the most important thing. But there's a little bit of a problem in that fun, from my perspective, is a probably overused word in that you're going to say, well, yeah, make it fun, and then the beat sort of drops. So let's just take a little closer look at maybe some sort of cultural relevancy of what we're talking about, the sort of outside place that informs our learning experiences. So you could mine a lot of different data that would suggest that the times are changing. And one of those things that I point to is the fact that esports is literally the second most viewed sport, if you want to call it that. And I know there's probably some contention around that in our country. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. E-gaming, esports are a thing. They are a very big thing. So I think if we continue this line of thinking a little bit further here, what does it mean then to be a part of what I would consider digital citizenship? These online social platforms, which are kind of adjacent to esports, the billions of views, minutes, money being spent in these spaces is staggering. And what is interesting from my perspective, from a psychological standpoint with kids, is what does this do to their social identity? What does this do to the means in which they express themselves? These are hyper pertinent to the discussion of children in 2021. So, screens, app culture, e-gaming, some more data. Screen-based play dominates childhood play. Post-COVID statistics, even more sobering in that you're seeing in this 11 to 13, 5 to 10-year-old demographic. This is data taken from a month ago. 44 to 47% of that age cohort is spending at least 4 hours on a screen a day. So if we look at the data, we are in this cultural moment of screen time. So what is Discover Golf's mission statement? Well, amongst other things, it's to reverse engineer the mechanics and dynamics of this app culture, esport, mediascape place that our children are living in, and to captivate their attention in a culturally relevant way. So what's going to be interesting, I hope, to all of you listening, is that each and every one of these features that we just talked about within these digital formats, they provide psychological nourishment, albeit shallowly, and we can kind of pick that apart in a second. But these themes of competency, social relatedness, autonomy, those are ever present in these screen experiences. Now, the downside, or what we can maybe learn from, is that they are exploiting and manipulating how the human brain metabolizes reward systems, which is another way of saying what games are. So we're going to kind of start to, I think, get into this constellation of fun, games, play, and try to look at it maybe from a more scientific standpoint. So I think just for me, and just to give you a little bit of context about how I think about my coaching, is I look at some census data about the county. So I teach in Scottsdale in the winter. I'm in Chicago in the summer. And we're super proud of our program. In 2019, we had 700 kids attend our summer golf camp program. And I think to myself that the reason that our program does so well is because it's not golf centric. It, I believe, is a more human centric, child centric experience that is using a lot of this line of thinking to captivate and compel these kids' attention. What I also immediately recognize that if I look at the census data, how many kids between 5 and 17 live in my county, and I look at the screen data, it's still not enough. So I am always pushing the envelope and saying, are we really growing the game when even the largest program in the state of Illinois or the Midwest is still being crushed by screen time and other options? So A lot of this comes down to our preference, Discover Golf's preference for a second by second, minute by minute approach. So everything that we're talking about is this experiential component of fun, of play, excuse me, which can be labeled as fun. All right, so let's get into these kind of glossary of terms. First things first, what is play? Now, it's a deep and wonderful scholarship, and I encourage people to do hand-to-hand combat with it. But for now, let's just give it a simple term of, or a simple definition of free movement within a rigid structure. Play happens because of and in opposition to constraints. Play is voluntary. Those that are told to or forced to play cannot experience play. So there's a lot to unpack there, but let's just use that gentleman that's in this orb as kind of a way to frame play. That gentleman's experience, haptic experience, visual experience, bodily experience, mental experience is more playful because of the orb that bounds his experience, because he's able to push and pull against the physical properties, rules of the orb, he is more able to play. This is a critical concept. And framing the experience, constraining the experience, you engender more playful experiences. So games in that sort of line of thinking are a series of meaningful choices, often ambiguous. Games are systematic, rule-bound, and almost always contain a quantifiable outcome. But what you can see here is now that you pit orb man versus orb man, the play is still happening within the orb, but now it's playing against another. And maybe there's a ring there, sort of like sumo style, and it's the first person to knock the person out of the sumo orb pit. Well, now you have rules and you have more meaningful choices because you're having this sort of cognitive battle with what are they going to do next based on the force and the velocity of their motion of the orb to me. And you create a probably deeper play experience because of the more rigid rules around this one-on-one. Okay, so if that's play and that's games in a nutshell, then the thing that's in the top right, which in my opinion is often framed as fun or as games or as play in a junior golf landscape, is in fact not a game at all. If we're using the definition of games are a series of meaningful choices, often ambiguous, the thing in the top right is a task because there is no choice. And if there's no choice, there really isn't a game. So then what is fun? Well, fun, as we were saying, is sort of this experiential component of play. Oftentimes it's a mental or physical state, but it's almost always, again, framed in this sort of context, mediated by specific brain chemistry that's linked to the anticipation of rewards. So this dialogue and research around reward systems within games is really the conduit where we find fun. So games, you are not. Games are not toys. Games are not puzzles. Games are not even contests. So just because you have Johnny and Sally playing first to make it to 5 doesn't really make it a game. Again, because there's maybe not enough of meaningful choices, but because the measurement is not obfuscated enough. And we can kind of get into a little bit about information theory and some other ideas, but for the most part, you would look at sort of this heuristic tree that they're not able to climb, that there's not enough learning within that particular drill, let's say. And I'm going to use this as a means to unpack as the presentation goes on. So 50,000 foot view, right? We talked about games, we talked about play, we talked about there's some rules in there, but what's the cultural climate around all of those things? Well, to the beginning of the presentation, it's the fact that the kids are consumed by their screens, they're consumed by e-gaming, they're consumed by social media. So that is going to inform the things that we do. All of what we do, all of the games that we play, all of the human experiences, the humans that participate are cultural figures. So they bring that culture into our learning space. And if we're not responsive to that, we are then rendered as tone deaf. So that's kind of how I see that from a global perspective. Maybe at a more micro perspective, I look at the games that I make, the games that we share, Discover Golf, as the orb, so to speak, that constrains our play culture. And so within this, there's meaning around what we do. So when you come to Discover Golf, you play, and the fact that you share and you map meaning into that experience gives you a cultural identity. That's community building. That's a huge part of our ethos. So if fun is an experiential element of play, let's get a little bit more into play, shall we? Theories in play, forms of play, reasons to play. So Discover Golf King Putt, got some playing going on. Okay, so here is some white paper research. Learning through play, a review of the evidence. I'm gonna just use this as a means to discuss the fact that you could look at play on two different spectrums, right? This idea that you have free play, which is this very effervescent, open, interpretive, sandbox style play. You see it in the jungle gyms. On the other side, you're gonna see more adult design, controlled, heavily constrained activity that falls outside of the umbrella of play. So like, I think as coaches, we need to say, well, the more and more in which we impose our will on kids or control the environment, the less playful it becomes. Okay, so some thinking, some people, some reading that's heavily informed, my thinking on this subject. Victor Turner, this is going to feel a little bit obscure for a junior golf presentation, but basically what he suggested is that play could be seen as liminal or liminoid, which is this idea that we are playing because we do it as almost a ritual, right? Which is that we're doing this thing to create existing order, that there's a power structure, that ultimately there's going to be a leaderboard and there's better players and weaker players, and you do this for the ends that it gives you. On the other side would be this more liminoid expression of play, which is that it's about progression and questioning and almost subversion to standing order. So when I think about my play formats, I want to give my kids a space in which they're able to grapple and tackle with maybe bigger concepts about who they are or their place in our community, or if this is even an activity that's worth their precious time. So I think from an overarching standpoint, liminal versus liminoid is maybe an interesting perspective. We distill all of that down to a sandbox railroad dichotomy. And you can see the sort of avalanche of rhetorics that would fall under each one of those concepts. But I think from a coaching perspective, it helps at least buttress our thinking in terms of how sandbox, open, interpretive, or controlled, parent-centric, golf-centric our format may be. So Irving Goffman, one of the most esteemed sociologists of the time, basically talks about how play is framed. And so when you see a Discover Golf program and you walk up on our putting green, you're going to see something like that. We are going to be robbing essentially worldly artifacts from a day at the museum, playing off of a night at the museum, trying to create some cultural relevancy, have a touch point so that it feels like something that they can immediately attach to, deeply thematic. You're playing a role. That's also a huge part of play. We are framing the experience. Within this place, you can clearly see you're allowed to do these things. On the right-hand side, if you say, okay, kids, it's time to play, but there's no frame, getting back to the original point about the orb, there's no frame, is play even possible? So the framing of play matters. Johann Huizenga, incredible work talking about the magic circle, talking about how culture forms in and around play. Very interesting work. Basically, play is secluded. It's cut off from materialistic status consequence. So all of these things, I think, are going to wrap into this idea of when you play, are you truly trying to create an immersive experience and play is good enough, right? It's the means of play that matter versus the ends that you get. Okay, we're playing Johnny because this is going to lead to chipping efficiency, which is going to lead to tournament competency, right? In that format, is it really play? Well, there's a long lineage of play theorists which would suggest that it's not play. So some sort of developmental psychology around the theme is that some of the major childhood milestones happen around this pivot when kids start to realize this new reality, which is in this case that a broom is not for cleaning, but it's a flying witch. It's this idea that you can imbue a sort of gameful motif around a seemingly non-gameful entity. So having that sort of disposition towards play and towards games is quite literally, milestones cognitively for children. So play rhetorics matter because I'm obviously espousing a sort of virtue, I think, or a rhetoric around play that's a little bit contrarian to the industry. Well, there's been numerous research to sort of map this out, this idea that when you as a golf coach play, do you play because it provides kids progress? So in the rhetoric of progress, children, not adults, use play as a way to develop socialization, cognitive motor skills. Play is seen as a means to development rather than enjoyment. Well, that's not the only rhetoric around play. You could use play to increase imagination, flexibility, creativity. You could use play, like we've talked about a little bit, to create community, right? To create shared meaning, to map focus on this mutual effort that all 70 of us are going to try to do at the same time in the same place. You can also use play, like I was mentioning, as a way to shine a light on yourself. This building of self is an amazing, I would say, benefit, right, of play. So the rhetorics of play matter because that's gonna inform the way that you articulate your decision to play or not play, or the forms of play. Okay, I'm probably a little bit short on time, so I'm gonna just shoot over to a little bit more research here. So we talked, that last slide was about this freedom of effort, right? Which is in a play format, players are allowed to modulate their intensity. So if you want to take a seat and watch play, but you're still in this magic circle, you're still having a gameful disposition, you're playing. So you don't always have to work when you're playing. Well, this matters because what I see in the junior golf industry, unfortunately, is this idea that it's about work, it's about progress, right? And it's about the ends of play rather than the means. Well, what's really interesting is research coming out of Quantic Foundry from Stanford, all available online, has looked at how the ocean personality model maps on to particular humans, in this case, all humans that were in the study, ocean personality on one side, the play patterns that they prefer on the other, and the two are highly correlated. Well, this idea of conscientiousness matters a lot because the level of conscientiousness that one has will directly correlate to the kind of work-like play pattern that they like. Well, what's the problem with kids? Well, 5 preteen teen brains do not have prefrontal cortex development that allows this kind of executive functioning, i.e. conscientiousness. So very smart play theorists and game designers have been using this data to map on the domain of play that would relate to your traits, right? In this case, openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness. Neuroticism is not featured because it didn't map well per the research. So on the right-hand side, you would say, well, these are the kinds of play that people that test high on these traits would prefer. So we could just stop right here and we could say, well, if you want a program that's the most accessible to the most amount of kids, you should have domains of play that map onto all personality traits. So conscientiousness as being the sort of focus point here and the lack of, let's call it biological brain function that it would take to be conscientious at an 8-year-old level means that you want a game with low challenge, low work. This is straight from the research, Quantic Foundry. I implore all of you to take a look at it. So this idea that completion, strategy, challenge, those are themes of play that are all clustered together. So if you like completing things, if you like strategy, if you like challenge, A, you're highly conscientious, which kids are not, but you like all three of those simultaneously. On the other side of that is this idea that those that are not high in conscientiousness want community, they want excitement, they want destruction. So what's the bridge then? So I look at this like, I think a lot of the discussion today will probably be around like, how do you get the kids from 4 to 7 to 9 to 12 now into more of a golfer, if you will? Well, A, I'm not so sure that that's even the goal, but B, if you were wanting to do that, what's the bridge? Well, it's power. It's this idea that out of community, out of competition, out of excitement, you start to have the most success, right? So, i.e., power. Then you look at more strategic, challenging, completive type exhibitions of that power. Really interesting research mapping personality to game patterns. So, there you go. That's a 5-year-old boy playing Discover Golf Slingers, and he is blowing things up. Straight from the research, the games are the conduit through which the theory flows. So on the left-hand side, you'd see a typical junior golf experience, a typical training experience, tic-tac-toe. On the right-hand side, you would see king putt. So one could say they're essentially doing the same thing, but on the right-hand side, we're using playful, gameful, mechanical structures, rule systems to engender a deeper form of play. Okay, so fun is an experiential component of play and plays within games. Let's break down games really quickly. And Josh, if I need to, you just tell me when I'm getting close to Q&A.
I think you keep rolling just to get to that point, and then we'll just do a couple questions and follow up. I want to follow up with you at least for a few minutes.
Okay, just can you give me the 2-minute warning?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so Discover Golf, we use a lot of different models. Again, 2-3 day workshops. There's no possible way I can dig into all that. We can look at one particular model, this idea that games could follow an anticipation model. So this is the architecture of what I call Neurofun. This idea that games are vehicles for rewards. Rewards are misunderstood. Games are misunderstood. So let's give everybody a little sense of how rewards and games work together to stimulate the brain, therefore stimulate activity and probably the best possible traits of our players. So this is some research done on the anticipation of a coming reward. So first of all, it has to be rewarding, which we learned from personality modeling is going to be different for everybody. So making the 5th putt in a row is not a reward for everybody. Making a par from 25 yards is not a par for everybody. Being on the golf course is not a reward for everybody. So we first of all have to suss out what a reward is for the player at hand. But once we've done that, if their sort of mental model of the play space is that they're 50% likely to achieve the thing that they so seek, they will, in their brain, have dopamine sort of, excreted the most and for the greatest period of time. So you can see here in purple, if they know they're getting the thing, right? This is participation culture at a neuroscientific level. If they know they're getting the thing, the dopamine's the least. If it's a 25 or 75% shot that they're going to get the thing that they want, it's second least. So 50% is the thing, is the challenge point, if you will. But this is my problem, is that challenge point has always been the thing that's been used. It hasn't been how challenge point relates to rewards, which relates to sort of neurochemical engagement. So dopamine is really fascinating. It's a reward chemical that contributes to alertness and arousal. Dopamine is associated with novelty, necessity to explore, goals to be reached. So not dopamine happens the most before the thing, before the reward. It's your anticipation of the reward that creates the dopamine, which gives you the alertness. And again, probably gives you, not probably, 100% gives you the best chance, I think, to deliver your physical traits to bear at hand of whatever activity you're doing. So
1 minute, 45-second warning, Mr. Franklin.
thank you. So beyond challenge point, what are some possible rewards for kids? Well, on the left-hand side, you're seeing a young lady, 5 years old, playing sheep shot. So within the game loop, she's looking for critical sheep wolf fencing pieces, which are meaningful decisions, getting back to games within a bigger game loop. On the right-hand side, same game, different boys, using, I would say, the haptic sort of pleasure of combing through the pieces, watching the opportunities for self-expression, seeing themselves have agency over their environment. There's some engineering in there. So those are all part of the dimensions of games as they relate to the reward circuitry that's underneath. So when your kid says, that was fun, or your kid is spinning a club around saying, what time is it? When do I get to leave? Or you've got 125,000 kids in your community not attending golf, it's because ultimately they don't understand or feel or believe you can provide the kind of reward structure that they're looking for. I'll stop there, Josh.
Richard, that is just, it's beyond fantastic. And again, I know you and I have spoke offline several times about this, and you know what I love so much about what you do. I mean, I've been running summer camps with the 40, 50 kids, 5, 6, 7 year olds running around the green, and we control the environment to a large degree. Not in the way you said control the environment by telling kids what to do, but you know, I have noticed in our programs, especially with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you know, the younger kids, like you're highlighting as the audience here, that when we set something up that's less structured, it has structure. It's clear that this is a game. There's something over here, and we let kids just play and spend less time telling them exactly what to do or exactly how to do it. And it's not so formalized. It allows kids to really dig into exactly what is the essence of the games that you have here. It is incredible to watch how much more the child lights up and opens up and like you said, has fun and talks about those experiences. I have a 5-year-old kid that I work with. We do one-on-one lessons on the range. It's a COVID environment thing. I can't get him back where I really want him. And the single most important game he wants to play is knock over the tower of baskets. That's it. It's literally knocked it. The higher I can build the tower of baskets, the more he knocks it over. We did one thing on a simulator, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world to put him on Pebble Beach. And the first thing he wanted to do in that environment, just because we had it, was I said, whatever you want to do, buddy. He turned the screen as far over to the water as he possibly could, and he wanted to see if he hit the ball into the water, would a fish jump out of the water and get it. And we ended up spending the entire thing talking about fish and dolphins and exploring and things.
If I may, I mean, that's really good news for those that are listening that, you know, maybe don't have access to a golf course. And I know you said there's other sort of childhood leaders here that, you know, don't work in golf at all. I mean, that's great news. You absolutely don't need a golf course to have a golf-like experience or to create a passion for what I would call the distillation of the game, which is a stick and a ball. I mean, that's really what I've tried to do, is strip down the experience to you're dynamically moving a stick in space, and the ball that you propel somewhere basically drives the engine of a game, right? And so through that engine, you develop a love of just the agency that you can have in your environment. I think most people would be just amazingly surprised at how non-compelling the golf course is for most 8-year-olds.
Yeah. No, again, I wish we had more time on this. I've got actually several cues in here. Please give him more time. Give him more time. We want to get into this. And unfortunately, in the setting, we're just not going to be able to do it. Richard, I'm going to follow back up with you. I would like to do this just from a, you know, and I'm talking with Anthony behind the scenes about how do we follow up off of this youth summit. Obviously, it's a packed day. It's a lot of quick hitters.
Yep.
I would like to hit back with you about an opportunity to maybe have a more focused session where there's a little bit more time, where we can really talk about offering out golf space for kids in ways that really get them to fall in love with play, fall in love with golf, fall in love with the game. And to your point, and I think it's a critical one, not against like the baseball kid, that's fine and well. It's the reality of a year off of COVID and what these devices are doing to kids. We really need to be better. And I'm going to say it as a profession, as a PGA professional, I'm going to say it flat out. We need to be better at understanding how to connect with our customer in ways that retain them and offer them value. And we will follow up and I look forward to future discussion on that with you. And I wish we had more
Absolutely.
time
Well,
here, bud, but
I appreciate you giving me some time, and it was a pleasure. Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you, Richard.